Welcome back to movementprofessional.com. So I'm here with Ki-Sun, and we're going to go over a shortstop position for a hip hinge as well as a hip hinge with a PVC pipe. All right, so this is a good starting point for teaching people how to deadlift, but also just really understanding the fundamental movement of the hip hinge. All right, so I'll usually start people kind of understanding how to get hip extension, through a posterior tilt. But when we come up into standing and work on the hip hinge, we no longer want to create a posterior tilt, or it's going to actually create too much flexion in the back. And then if we start to load that by lifting, we're going to just create forces that we don't want on the spine. So now we're looking for more of a neutral lumbar curve. And we're going to do that while we're in standing, and then also as we're going into a slight hip flexion, which would be the hip hinge. So first thing we'll start with, and let's just put the PVC to the side first, is we're just going to go into like a shortstop position, which is a term that I first heard from Stuart McGill. But it's simple and it makes a lot of sense. So we want to understand actually where the hips are first. So let's have you put your hands, just touch like the groin area here, okay? So you just know where the hips are. Because a lot of people think the hips are kind of the outer hip bone, but the hips are actually really right through the groin. So just to get a sense of what hip extension is, you want to just feel those hip creases kind of push into the hands. When you do that, you should feel your glutes squeeze. So there can be a tendency, if you're going to push into the hands, that you also arch the back and move that way. But we want to stay stable through the ground, so feel the feet stable through the ground pushing through. And if you feel those hip creases move into your hands, you should also feel your glutes turn on, correct? All right, so this is going to be the standing position, knowing that you're at least getting to this kind of neutral hip extension. And then the abdomen should have a little bit of tension in it, kind of right across the hip bone. So if we want to look at what actual true pelvic neutral position is, it would be the two bony parts of your hips. So if you can take an open hand, you can hit really where the two bony parts are. And then down here is your pubic bone, all right? So you got these two, and then it makes a triangle through there, all right? That should be flat. If you're standing and you can no longer see that pubic bone, that's an anterior rotation, which is going to be coupled with an extension in your lower back. And then if you're able to see the pubic bone, you will be in more hip extension, but you're also going to likely be in more lumbar flexion, which again is not going to carry over well to when we want to hinge and deadlift. All right, so we want to keep that flat and standing. And it's really important that we actually take the time to understand the standing position, because it'll be much easier when we go into the hip hinge not to have to refine this position. All right, so we got that position there. Let's just put the hands like right on the hips, make sure we get a sense of that level position. And then all I want you to do is just take a bow. All right, and still feel like you have that sense of that flat triangle there, all right? And then that's you now going into, let's actually do a profile here. All right, so same thing, your butt goes back, all right, but you're going to just take a bow for me, trying to maintain that same feeling in the pelvis, and just keep moving your hips back a little bit. Good, right about there. Now maintain that, and then just slide your hands to your knees. All right, so that's the shortstop position right there, like as if a shortstop in baseball is ready to field a ground ball. All right, so we have a pretty straight line now from the back of the head. So one of the things that I'm going to do, so he gets a sense of it, everything's good down lower, just bring your head up a little bit so the back of your head touches. All right, so now we have all three curves of the spine kind of on the same plane. All right, and that'll also help with just what's proper head position. So the way he had his head before, it was in too much flexion, more flexion than he would need. If there's weight that's going to be pulled up from the ground, he's already in a little bit of flexion. The weight's going to pull him into more flexion. So it's good to have a nice sense of length in being in one plane of motion or one line of motion. All right, so while we're here, now we can actually focus on seeing how much control you have in this position. So what I want you to do is try to round your spine, or like do a posterior tilt. All right, so we can see he's got pretty good motion there. He's able to tuck his pelvis under. It's able to soften the belly. All right, and then go in the opposite direction, where you're going to actually want to rotate your pelvis forward and see if you can get some extension through the spine. All right, so that's actually a little bit more difficult for you. Any pain or discomfort doing any of that?
Little pain.
Little pain? All right, so come out of that pain. All right, no pain going that way?
Nope.
All right, and then find neutral again. So find the center and see if you can get a sense of that. All right, so what we want to do then is just go ahead and slide your hands back up to standing. All right, and then your hands will return back to that position you had before, feeling, okay, I got this neutral pelvis here, the glutes should be on, and there should be a little bit of tension right across there. This tension right across your hips, or right across the ASIS is there, is going to be your feedback for the fact that you kept stability. When you're in this position, you're not going to be able to feel your glutes anymore when you go into your hip hinge. So you want to make sure that you're still feeling that tension across the hips. And that will tell you that you still have that neutral position. All right, so let's maintain that again. Slide down, still feeling that, and bring your hands to your knees. All right, and you're just going to hold there, and I just want you to breathe a little bit. Some of the cues you can give people while they're in this position are try to think about your thigh bones going into the socket. See if that intensifies that tension right across your hip bones. All right, you can also think about holding in a P or pulling your pelvic floor up and see if that intensifies that tension across the low belly. All right, and then slide your hands back up and feel your hip creases kind of push into the hands. Make sure you're back to that neutral position. All right, so you can do that. It's really a practice. You just want to feel like that becomes easy so then you can move on to the next step. All right, then the other thing you can do to get this sense of the hip hinge properly is get the PVC. Let's go 3 points of contact. Okay, so it's going to touch your tailbone, between your shoulder blades, back of your head. All right, and then what I want you to do is just, again, same idea. Now you don't have the hands in contact anymore, so you just have to take a bow and try to just keep all 3 points of contact of the PVC as you go into your hip hinge. All right, good. So right about there you can stop, and then it's the same type of cueing. Your shoulders are going to be in a bit of an asymmetrical position, so we would do this on both sides, but we want to get a sense of thigh bones going into the socket. See if you can get that tension right across the belly. Pull the pelvic floor up, see if you can get that tension across the belly, and then stand back up. As you stand up, feel your feet push through the ground. All right, make sure you return to standing. You feel all 3 points of contact, and then you can get a sense of that tension across the lower belly. All right, so I think this is actually more of a progression than the first one because that tactile feedback, that ability to touch the pelvis and understand what neutral is, I think is really important, and that's the first step. Here he doesn't have that tactile feedback, but he does have the feedback from the PVC to tell him what a neutral or straight spine is. All right, so again, we would do that on both sides, and we would see if there's a difference. So also, if you have some shoulder mobility issues, it might not be the thing to do. All right, but that's just a way to start the process of looking at the hip hinge, which is going to carry over to more challenging movements like the deadlift and the squat going forward. If you have any questions, you can go to movementprofessional.com. I'll see you next time.